Attack on Titan took the anime world by storm when the first season aired in mid-2013. I remember attending an anime convention and it seemed like literally half of the cosplayers there were Attack on Titan cosplays. Needless to say, it was a big anime, pun intended, and it was a highly talked about series with people praising how amazing it was, yet there were others saying how overrated it was. Upon hearing how divided the opinions were in the series, I dove right into it, and also because everyone was talking about it and I didn't want to feel left out. My impressions of the first episode were pretty much, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen!" But then, after a few episodes in, my excitement wavered and waned and I began questioning how a series with such a strong prologue could disappoint me just as much as checking my account balance does. It was back in like early 2014 that I actually watched the series, but I do remember the main reasons why I disliked it. First off, I remember not liking Eren. I just perceived him as this loud, overly emotional character whose main driving force is his hatred of Titans for killing his mom. Now, it's fine to be emotional and to have motivations, but he just came off as this person whose entire character is literally his desire to kill Titans. I never found any qualities about him that made me like him, but I probably only just remember the negative parts about him. Another reason I disliked the first season was that the plot was just so oddly paced. I remember not really being invested in story and not quite following what was going on, though that was likely due to not having any emotional connection to any of the characters since I don't remember being a fan of any of them. Well, except maybe Sasha the potato girl. Everyone likes her. By the end of the first season, I was just glad to have finished it. I felt like I was obligated to at least complete the season so that I can have an opinion on it, and my opinion was, it really was overrated. Eventually, I kept hearing about Attack on Titan being good now, and while patiently waiting for this lockdown to end, I decided I would rewatch the first season and catch up on the anime in preparation for season 4. I wanted to rewatch season 1 because I didn't just want to continue into season 2 as it had been years since I first watched it. And this time around, I will do a brief analysis of my second watch through of Attack on Titan, as well as give my newly formed opinions on it, with the added bonus of my non-live reaction to the series, with a fresh perspective. And with that, let's get started. Now, I expected this episode to be really good because it had such a great impact the first time I watched it, and it did a good job at establishing the setting and plot expectations. It starts off with the Colossal Titan looking into the city inside. Eren, narrating, mentions how they are rudely reminded that they are simply humans living in cages and that they're ruled over by the Titans. And shortly after that, it transitions over to a scene of the Survey Corps members riding through a forest on their way to fight back against a Titan to reclaim land outside the walls that were once humanity's. The juxtaposition of humans fighting back in contrast to the powerless city pushed into a corner by the Titans puts a little more emphasis on the hope that they might drive these creatures back. Until, of course, later on when they return and we find out that their mission was a complete and utter failure and that they gained nothing and lost plenty, which takes away any hope and paints despair onto the faces of everyone. This is gonna be a common theme throughout the series of just constant despair, hopelessness, and fear, but most of all the lack of accomplishments. Sounds exactly like life, to be honest. Before we are introduced to our protagonist, we get the opening theme, which is honestly one of the greatest out of all the animes I've seen. It just really gets me hyped up. Let's talk about the art style. It is very flashy yet gritty, which helps emphasize the tone for the anime. The thick lines accentuates the depth of the characters in the frame, and the extra details to their faces help convey their expressions, especially the grim and solemn ones they express frequently. Furthermore, the 3D animations of certain shots are amazing, and the cinematography in shots like this, where the camera travels through the Titan-infested fields, is really well done as it gives off that sense of urgency when the wall is taken down and the Titans start swarming in. Okay, so let's actually get back to the episode. We get some horrific foreshadowing flashes, and then Eren wakes up. We are introduced to two of our protagonists, Eren and Mikasa. Mikasa shows concern for Eren, who obviously had a nightmare, and immediately we can tell that they have a rather close relationship. Obviously, as this is my second watch through, I know that Mikasa is overprotective of Eren and values him the most, but at the time I just figured they were close friends before finding out that they are essentially adopted siblings. There's a shot of a wall worshipper preaching to the passersby, and then a shot of the Titans unable to get through the wall. This establishes the situation the city is in. The walls are protecting them from the Titans, and there are people who treat the walls as divine gifts from God. They meet up with Hans, and we can see that he's drunk. With the vibes I'm getting from just the first 5 minutes of this anime, I kinda have expected Hans to just bully Eren or even beat him up even. I figured that this was one of those animes that portray adults as evil and corrupt. Eren shows his passionate side, reprimanding the garrisons, the military division that protects and maintains order within the walls, for being lazy and unprepared should a Titan breach into the city. But Hans defends himself by saying that if they have too much free time and slacking, then it means that everyone is safe. And you know, I kinda see what he's saying. If we lived in a world where police officers have too much free time, I'd feel super safe. I mean, assuming there weren't corrupt cops in the world. It kinda reminds me of Hawks' desire from My Hero Academia to create a world where heroes have too much free time on their hands. We get to the part where the Survey Corps return from their expedition outside the walls, and we are shown the state of humanity. They learned nothing, and the deaths of their comrades were practically in vain.
息子の死は人類の反撃の糧になったんですよね。
私が無能なばかりにただいたずらに兵を知らせ奴らの正体を打ち止めることができませんでした。
There's a lack of support for them among the civilians, but Eren still wholeheartedly supports them, believing them to be heroes that should be respected. Pretty regular for a protagonist to have someone or some people to look up to, and fuels his desire to join the Survey Corps, which becomes his first goal for the series. But when his parents find out, or rather when Mikasa rats him out on it, they oppose the idea, leading to a fight between Eren and his mother. His father conveniently has to leave and tells Eren that he will show him what's hidden in the basement, which will become a major plot point later on. Eren argues with his mother some more and runs off, and we see Armin getting bullied by the older kids. This scene alone shows the major differences between the three protagonists and their defining characteristics. Armin is an intelligent person who lacks combat abilities, Eren is an impulsive, hard-headed but determined and passionate character, and Mikasa is level-headed and, based on the bully's reaction, has rather frightening fighting capabilities. I guess the women in this anime are just supposed to be scary. And we get to the catalytic event that sets the course for the rest of the series, the arrival of the Colossal Titan. There's a perfectly suited choir drop here as the first major plot point happens, and it is absolutely terrifying.
巨人だ。
The wall breaks and all hell breaks loose. There's panic, chaos, and death. We're in the first episode and we already get slammed with scenes of precious human lives being taken away so effortlessly. It is a grim situation, and the emotional tensions are at a high even though we haven't spent that much time with any of the characters to form a strong emotional connection with any of them. And we know there's no hope for them because, as we found out earlier, the garrison is actually not prepared to fight the Titans. Eren runs home to make sure that his mom is okay, but she's trapped under the heavy debris. And here comes Hans. He now has a chance to redeem himself by showing up to take down the Titan so that Eren can free his mom and they can both escape together. Hans faces the Titan and... You know, this scene was perfect at conveying the humanity in Hans and the terror he felt. That's what I absolutely love about this one shot. Heck, even I was unnerved upon seeing it, and when something actually makes me feel uneasy and afraid, I know that it's one hell of an impression. Look at that. Just look at that. That's nightmare fuel right there. Hans falters and runs away. Despite him failing to work up the courage to take down the Titan and save Eren's mom, I can't help but feel sorry for him and that I understand his fear and why he did what he did. This is a very real emotional reaction as Hans comes face to face with something that hadn't been a threat to humanity for over a century. Heck, if I was in his position, I wouldn't even have attempted to face a Titan and would have been just like, "Dude, you're on your own!" This scene, when she gets devoured by the Titan, as Eren looks on helplessly, right before the episode ends, is the perfect way to set up the emotional stakes of what's to come. Topped off with the narration of humanity being reminded of the terror that awaits them outside the walls that cage them to truly make our heroes feel really small against the giant obstacles ahead of them. And yes, the pun was intended again. We get a quick backstory of the world of Attack on Titan, and we learn more about the three walls that protected humanity. Wall Maria, Wall Rose, and Wall Sina, where humanity enjoyed a century of peace. There's a lot to criticize about this, like how could they build large 50-meter high walls after the Titan showed up? You think that during the construction of the walls, which would obviously require plenty of manpower, there was a constant threat of Titans impeding the progress. But that's probably a mystery that will hopefully be revealed later on. Despite that, I think it was a good choice to include this little prologue in the second episode rather than the first episode. The first episode opened with a shot of the Colossal Titan overlooking the wall, bringing the emphasis on the theme of humans being caged. And it keeps the origins of the Titans more of a mystery during the first episode, allowing us to focus more on just the events that are occurring in the present day. After the impression the previous episode had left on me, I am excited to start the second episode, but before that, there's the epic opening theme time. So, leaving off from the last episode, disarray and turmoil are ensuing. A wall worshipper preaches to the civilians that this is their punishment for defiling the walls with human hands. Meanwhile, people are killed and eaten by Titans everywhere. Yeah, it's pretty horrifying. Hans manages to take Eren and Mikasa to safety. Eren is rightfully angry at Hans and he blames him for the death of his mother. And what the Hans says here is what really made me like him even more as a character.
お前が母さんを助けられなかったのはお前に力がなかったからだ。俺が巨人に立ち向かわなかったな。俺に勇気がなかったからだ。
He is quick to admit to his own faults and doesn't deflect the fact that it was his own weakness that he couldn't rescue Eren's mom. Eren is breaking down and Mikasa gets a brief flashback. And then back to the humans scrambling to escape into the inner wall. We get some exposition dump on the layout of the walls, and I like this because it gives me a better visualization of, well, the layout of the walls and where exactly everyone is retreating to. Eren and Mikasa make it to the boat, and Armin is already there and realizes that Eren lost someone he loved.
今はやめておきなさい。かわいそうに、あの様子じゃよっぽど。
Here we begin to see the theme of logic versus emotion. While I believe that the two are both important and should be used together, the situation here is literally life and death. The boat sails away because it's full, but that means leaving behind the others who didn't make it. It's not really clear if that's the last boat, and there really isn't much of a choice here since if the boat is full, the boat has to leave and can't take any more. The theme of making the right decision comes into play here when the gate is being closed despite many civilians still being in the city. And the argument here is,
この門を突破されたら、町一つが巨人に占拠されたどころの話じゃない。次の壁まで人類の活動領域が後退するんだぞ。
And he's right, it's too risky to leave the gate open and to let more civilians in since the risk of losing the entire area inside Wall Maria far outweighs the benefits of saving the civilians who are still lagging behind. It's awful to say that, I know, but the bigger picture here is what's important. Regardless, this debate becomes a moot point as the armored titan shows up and just YOLOs the wall. Anyways, Wall Maria has fallen and the entire population within the territory has to evacuate to within Wall Rose. And again, it's extremely despairing to say the least. Even worse, Eren regrets the last conversation he had with his mom. I guess it's things like this that remind you why you should always treasure the people around you because you never really know when will be the last time you actually see them again. What Hans said about Eren and himself being weak come into play here as Eren, driven by anger and desire for revenge, resolves to kill every titan out there. It would have been nice if Eren's desire to help humanity was also part of his motive alongside his own personal emotions, but this is fine. Our protagonist is determined to pursue a goal. We get some flashbacks, I think? His father, Grisha, appears to be forcing some drug into Eren while also giving him the key to the basement.
何をしようとしてるの。
いいから腕を出しなさい。
嫌だ。父さんお母さんが死んでおかしくなったんだ。
Now that the entire population within Wall Maria has to evacuate into Wall Rose, there is an issue of overpopulation and lack of resources to feed everyone. A member of the garrison complains that they have to share their food to the residents of Wall Maria and wish that more of them had been eaten by the Titans so that there'd be less mouths to feed. Again, logically speaking, it makes sense since the sudden increase in population density would be a detriment to the entire human population as a whole, but to outright state that human lives should be treated as disposable is downright deplorable. So Eren confronts the garrison member, being the passionate, reckless character that he is, and he gets beaten up only for Armin to defuse the situation. Eren refuses to eat the bread since he doesn't want to rely on awful people, but Armin says that he should anyways or else he'll starve, and again this is another scene that showcases their different personalities. There's not much of a debate here since Eren's just simply being overly emotional and not thinking properly. Mikasa punches Eren and simply calls him weak, just like what Han said, and says that he needs to start to eat in order to become strong enough to kill the Titans, as Eren promised he would do. Mikasa then forces the bread into his mouth. Is this supposed to resemble that romantic spoon feeding trope? I guess it leans more on the forceful feeding one, but Mikasa does have a romantic interest in Eren, so let's just say it's the former one. The theme that I see, logic versus emotion, is played once more in this episode. Or rather, it's more like logic versus morality, but in the end, it's really emotions that would go against logic in this case as well. The refugees were made to work in the fields in order to grow more food for the sudden increase in population within Wall Rose. And a year later, the government sends out 250,000 people, 20% of the population, to a mission to retake Wall Maria. In truth, this was a suicide mission meant to alleviate the food shortage for the rest of the population. Was this the logical thing to do? Yes, but was it morally correct? No, it wasn't. It really is a tough decision. Why don't we go ask Thanos what he thinks of this?
A small price to pay for salvation.
Eren wishes to become stronger to fight the Titans. Armin and Mikasa, who were both initially against the idea, join him after witnessing the culling of their own population. Well, actually, I think Mikasa did it anyways because she just wanted to go wherever Eren went, but whatever. But the episode ends with a time skip as Eren and the other two enlist in the 104th Cadet Corps to receive training. We are introduced to Keith Sades, a bald commandant with sunken eyes. He gives a lovely speech.
今の貴様らはせいぜい巨人の餌になるしかないただの家畜以下の存在だ。そんなクソの役にも立たん貴様らを我々が3年かけて鍛え上げる。
Before we see Eren's resolve once again to kill every last Titan in existence. Blah.